This is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast. This is VP. We are a solutions-based podcast, diving into the world of contrarian investing and alternative finance. You can find us hosted on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, NoNonsenseForex.com, and podcast players everywhere. Episode 245 is brought to us by Bybit. Get this, there's a big to-do right now with places like Monetary Metals giving you up to 4% return on your gold, which really is awesome. But we all know with crypto you can do even more, and on Bybit you can hold your XAUT, Tether's gold product, and get up to a 12% return on it. 12% on your gold. I know a lot of you out there already hold digital gold products. Not only do you get access to the best trading platform in the world, you also get 10 to 12% on your gold just sitting there. Click my link, which is down below in the Bybit blog. It's that very first link. Click it. Get yourself signed up. Stop messing around. Start making money. We live in uncertain times, contrarians. Make all of the money you can before it's too late. Get yourself plugged into the Bybit ecosystem, because with Bybit, membership has its rewards. Big ones. It is a 10-Minute Contrarian podcast, and I missed y'all last week. There's no real great reason for why. I just got way bogged down with other things. It had nothing to do with the situation going on where I live. If you guys don't know, I live here in Mexico, and it was in one of the cities where things got locked down for one whole day. There was a Sunday where one of the leaders of now the largest cartel in Mexico got offed by the United States, and the cartel does what they always do and protest and show their unhappiness. And they closed down the airport and the roads, so there was no way out. Very scary. Until you realize why they closed down the roads, to make sure the bad guys don't come in, mostly. And the airport was more of a precautionary thing. Everything was open again the very next day. And everything was completely back to normal the day after. But you would never have known that had you had been the type of person who listens to traditional media and social media and also chooses to believe everything they say. More importantly, if you buy into the severity often expressed by these people. Now, I always knew that media is very sensationalized all across the world. If you ask somebody who actually lives in the places these people are talking about, you will often get a very, very different story. And you have to remember, too, most people, I would say outside of Europe and certain parts of Asia, they barely travel abroad. So you can tell them almost anything, and they will mostly believe it simply because they wouldn't know otherwise. So I already knew that people, especially on social media, because that's where I get almost all of my media nowadays, I know that they're very dramatic and over the top and they sensationalize things. But then I actually lived it, and I really got to see how bad and how just over the top and melodramatic, needlessly too, these people are. And they do it for their own benefit, for their brand, which means they're also doing it at the expense of truth and a grown-up, rational social media experience. It's bad across the board. And now that X is actually paying people for engagement, they engagement farm and rage bait all the livelong day. Accuracy? It's not about accuracy at all. They will post patently false things. They will post AI videos. They will post videos from 12 years ago and say it's happening now. And a lot of people will do it unwittingly. Like Grant Cardone put out an AI video and said, "Look what's going on." You know, I'm sure he didn't do that on purpose, but these things proliferate because people don't know what they're doing. And then they use very dramatic buzzwords. They'll capitalize them. They do the thing we talk about here on the podcast, the "oh my God, it's all over" type rhetoric. And this makes your average idiot think that these places are going to just end up like Gaza, like just end up completely flattened and burned to the ground. This is very much not the case almost ever. Just know that going forward. The same thing is going on with Dubai right now. Another wonderful place to live. Now, I will say Dubai is certainly getting it worse than Mexico is, but I have friends in Dubai. I have contacts in Dubai. I have social media follows who live there. And they're all like, yeah, it's fine here. It's safe. We're going out. We're partying. A lot of what you see on social media is not really happening here. Most of the targets around the Middle East are military. Sometimes they're not, but they usually are. And in the UAE, roads were not closed, so people could leave that way if they wanted to. I think the airport is just now opening up. It's been a while. But you could take the roads out. There are more inland cities. I know somebody who lives in one of them. It's a city called El Ain. And then you could also take the roads into Saudi Arabia or Oman. And you could leave that way if you wanted to. But most people didn't. Most people stayed. I wrote on my blog, I'm not going to go too much more into this today, Contrarians, because I've already written about this, and I've already but Substack's great. If you haven't subscribed to my Substack, the link is down below. You can really express yourself without really any fear of retribution. Now, some people take it too far, but I personally express my own feelings more so on the last blog post I wrote, called, Well, You Did Ask for This. And every other blog post I have written in the last maybe 3 or 4 months. Many of them are evergreen. They're concepts. So go check that out. But the main point here is just understand that almost everything you're going to see nowadays on social media is written by an over-dramatic 13-year-old who isn't old enough to understand nuance yet. Now, this is obviously not really the case, but just read it through the lens of somebody like that, and you will actually end up being closer to the truth than you would otherwise. Yeah, it's a mess out there, Contrarians. It's really hard to know what's actually what. And when the main rhetoric out there right now is, are we in World War III or are we not? Pretty stupid question for the most part, I think. I think if you've ever studied World War I or World War II, to say that we're even close to anything like that right now is crazy. But also, even if we are, it's not a useful question. Remember, we are a solutions-based podcast here because, and what makes us so contrarian, is most people don't focus on solutions. They are only interested in the problem. And they are hoping for the most miserable outcome, usually, because their lives are miserable. And given what we all know about fiat currency, most people's lives are only going to get more miserable because they are not solutions-focused people. We, on the other hand, are. So let's spend the majority of the rest of this podcast episode focusing on that. Now, if you remember, too, those of you who've been with me for a while, I told you at the beginning of the decade, when the pandemic was happening, I'm like, guys, you think this is crazy? Just know it's going to get crazier. We are in a fourth turning. This is how these things are. And it's going to seem crazy because, one, of the media we have available to us now. And two, our baseline is so high. During turnings 1, 2, and 3, life is generally so good, especially in prosperous countries, that even the slightest downturn is just like things we can't even handle. In the West, we are soft. We are weak. Everything's a fucking crisis. Everything's the potential end of the world. Now, I will say, during fourth turnings, they are very bloody, and the unprepared suffer. Now, we are way more prepared than your average person is here. I'm assuming you are if you execute. If you don't, and you just like listening to podcasts, then you're with them. You're not with us. But I will imagine the majority of you have probably taken steps well ahead of time to prepare yourself for what's coming. Now, usually when wars happen, that's generally, you're a bit late, but you're certainly not too late. Especially if things escalate, and especially if things get crazier. Now, I said back in 2020-21 that they were absolutely getting crazier. If you were to ask me right now, I would say not definitely, but probably. And if you're just so soft and your life has been so good and you're thinking right now things could not possibly get crazier than they already are, I have some bad news for you. You should certainly expect them to get worse. So if that getting worse part involves further war and or escalation of current wars or other wars which proliferate out of conflicts we currently have, then it's probably in your best interest to profit off of it. I know that sounds horrible, but as we always say, if it's going to happen anyway, it's not like we're really contributing to the cause. We must look out for ourselves and our families. So the big question is, what are the best investments during times of war and extended war? I will reiterate, most of what we're talking about are things that we have been investing in for a very long time. We tend to do that here. We tend to get ahead of what's coming. However, you can still do well investing now, assuming that the conflict is going to be extended. Not necessarily this current conflict, but just conflicts in general. And what we do know is we are in a fourth turning. Globalization is done, and the reshuffling of the chessboard is currently happening. And these transitions historically have always been very contentious and very bloody. So what goes up during extended times like this? Well, short answer, most things. Because wars are a great reason or a great excuse for the largest economies in the world to provide extra stimulus into their economies. This has always been the case, at least in the last 120 years or so. So currently we see the S&P and the Dow and the tech sector especially start to turn over. And you have the majority of financial Twitter calling the next recession. So my biggest question to you, I think at this point, is when have they ever been right about this? Like when they all collectively get together and say it's happening. How often does it actually happen? Almost never. We all know that true recessions come out of nowhere. They happen when almost nobody is talking about the possibility of it happening. Now, with social media, you're always going to get somebody out there who's just being contrarian for contrarian's sake, just so they can say they called it, even though they're almost always wrong. But we all, you and I, we spoke about this at the very first episode of the year, the big macro episode. In the United States at least, they are already going to do what they can to stimulate the economy. And especially at this point with current sentiment out there, if the Trump administration wants to win the midterms, they're going to have no other choice. We said that before all this stuff started happening. Stimulus is coming. The money printers are turning on. And that's good for most things not named the United States dollar. And it certainly won't just be the United States who does this. Even economies around the world who don't want to, they still need to compete, or else investor money is going to go away from their economy and into the place that's stimulating. So not only did we say stimulus is already coming, war in wartime economies almost always end up in economic stimulus packages, which makes number go up. I think what we're seeing right now, not financial advice, but I think what we're seeing right now is just that initial panicky reaction that Wall Street and your average home investor always ends up falling for. But if I'm putting two and two together, I think stimulus and therefore bullishness to the economy is fairly obvious, barring some type of black swan event. Which I understand, given what's going on in the world right now, the chances of something like that, again, proliferating from what's going on currently, I would say it's probably higher, but you can't predict black swan events, so I'm just simply not going to. But in general, I would expect most things to go higher. Now, what goes even higher during a wartime economy, assuming that's what we are in now and assuming that's what's going to continue? So we start with the classic answer. The classic answer has always been oil. Now, the price of oil itself is always fairly volatile during these times, especially when conflicts happen in places where there is a lot of oil, which is what we're seeing right now. Now, the price of oil kind of waxes and wanes with what's the word I'm looking for? Implied severity of what's going on at the time. So, I don't know. Maybe being a short-term oil trader would be a good idea, but as far as what we do, as far as the investing world, what we normally do is stick with the upstream producers and then your service providers. So your producers, the best way to look at this would be an ETF like XLE. Chart that and see what it's telling you. Now, we spoke before. We spoke back in January, not even that long ago. And we also talked about it specifically back in the fall, how we were already in the oil game. So we have front run this as we often do, but like I said, if you think this is going to be prolonged, oil is a great place to be. So XLE on the producer side. On the services side, my favorite ETF to look at is ticker symbol OIH. Now, there's a game to be played here. But a game that I think is very easily winnable. If you think certain oil service providers, especially internationally, if you think a lot of their services could be disrupted, and what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz right now is quite disruptive, especially with the insurance companies not insuring a lot of these boats anymore or threatening to pull out, then those who are left standing are going to benefit tremendously, because oil just cannot stop coming. That's not an option in 2026. We rely on it way too heavily. So you want to look to companies where their competition is being negatively affected, yet they are still staying fairly clean. There is some real money to be made there. So if you hadn't gotten into the oil game just yet, but you want to participate, one, I don't think it would be a terrible idea at all. But two, look for situations like the one I just described. That's the game. Pay closer attention to who is not being affected, because they win big by simply not being in the conflict areas when their competition is. And tickers like XLE and OIH have already been pulling back this month, and I think it's a premature move. So that's good for people who are not in this yet. That is giving you an opportunity to enter at what is likely a fair price. A lot of people are asking me, what to invest in now during these times, because it's not because they're just late. They're late to this sector, but they might have had their money elsewhere and they want to know where else to go. I think this is a really good opportunity, especially because, you know me, if you're going to give me cheaper prices for no reason or for a stupid reason, I'm looking. So I would put oil at the top of this list. Next, which is fairly obvious to me, should be fairly obvious to you, would be precious metals. And just in time, we saw a pullback, not even that long ago, that probably didn't even really need to be there. People are saying we went up so much we had to pull back. Okay, that's fine, but doesn't change the story. Doesn't change the need for precious metals. Doesn't change what's really going on. And the great thing about precious metals is during conflicts like this, especially when conflicts escalate, especially when conflicts get worse overall, people who sat on their hands and didn't understand the need for it before, all of a sudden do. And then you get this wave of people who never really took it seriously in the past. Now all of a sudden they're coming in. And it's not just the retail crowd, it's everybody else. I've seen a lot of really great factual charts on X lately of just how companies are still so underinvested in gold. This has no choice but to change. And we all know silver follows gold. So I still think there are really, really great opportunities there, especially on the mining side. So if you think you missed the biggest parts of the run, I don't think you did. Or at least we could see something a lot like what we've seen in the past year. Again, because I think the precious metal story is still in its early stages. And times of conflict do nothing but escalate this. So if you've really been with us and you haven't started a position here yet, or if you simply want to add on to current positions, not financial advice again, but I think you could do way, way worse for all the reasons we just described. Now, another sector that we don't talk about a lot here is food and food imports. These have historically have always gone up during times of war because supply chains get disrupted. Now, if you really have been with me for a while, you do know that I have dabbled in this market. I've just done it unsuccessfully because the food market and food inputs, it's a hard place to be. You really have to dig in and go for the long term, and you still might not get the results you want because there are just so many variables at play. Really too much for my liking. I'm not saying it's a bad place to be. People have made a lot of money off of fertilizer stocks and soft commodities and things like that. It's just not something we typically do here. And on any given day, if I have capital to deploy, I'm almost never looking here as opposed to somewhere that I'm more familiar with. So the answer is a resounding yes when it comes to food and fertilizer and things like that. But if you don't hear about it too much on this show, just understand why. Again, not a bad idea, just not a pool I play in very often. But hey, if we get depressed prices and there's a long-term outlook, this will be a place to go. But don't expect me to mention it much until that time comes. Now, an obvious one that, even though I feel it's obvious, I don't think it gets talked about enough in the investing world. And that's going to be defense stocks. Now, every president in my history has always catered to the military-industrial complex and the defense industry. I mean, these people are mafia. And they do a really good job of convincing you that you need them, and it's probably in your best interest to give them what they want so their services don't go elsewhere. And every president in my history has complied and obliged to this, but for obvious reasons, defense stocks do pretty damn well in a war. I mean, duh. And the problem is, though, if you've been tracking these at all, I think the best way to do this is through the ETFs. And as far as ticker symbols go, I didn't write these down. So off the top of my head, you have ITA, XAR, PPA. But I'll save you the suspense. They've all ran, like a lot, already. So again, this is not a reason to not invest in them if you think the future is going to look like this or even worse. But we do look for some value sometimes on this show, as you know. And I don't think there is a whole lot there. I mean, you guys go look at those three ticker symbols. I haven't even looked at them in a while, but I can tell you, one, they usually run together. Two, the price is really, really high right now. So I just didn't want to be an idiot and forget to mention defense stocks in a wartime economy, but I personally have no interest in investing in them at these prices. Again, wouldn't be a terrible idea, but when you have other sectors out there which can compete much better on price and value, that's where I would be looking to go. So I don't think saying to invest in defense companies during times of war is very contrarian, but what can be fairly contrarian is this. One thing that has certainly gone on lately is there have been a lot of munitions, a lot of missiles and things like that, which have been spent and expended. Now, for some countries, they're older munitions. For some countries, they're testing out some of the newer ones. But what I do know is when munitions get depleted, countries don't just sit there and say, oh, I guess our munitions are depleted now, boo-hoo. No, they fix the problem, and they get their munitions back to a level they are comfortable with. You certainly don't want to all of a sudden end up vulnerable during times like this. So chances are these countries are going to want to get their own munitions back to par. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of self-study for this. You need to go find out which metals in particular make up a lot of these munitions. Silver. But there are many. And remember, these countries do not care how much it costs to replenish their munition supplies. It's going to happen no matter what, and the supply of a lot of these metals is going to go down even further. But again, I can't sit here and tell you everything. You got to do a little bit of independent study on this. Now, if you want to contribute to this conversation in a productive, solutions-based way, I would love for you to do that here. And if you're thinking of other sectors or other companies, which I may have neglected to mention, this podcast does go to YouTube. I know the majority of you are listening on a podcast player, but you can always go to YouTube, look up the 10-Minute Contrarian podcast, look up this episode, and contribute. Let us know in the comments section what you are looking at during times like this and why. We can always go deeper. We can always get more granular with things here. But I think these are just the major sectors to look at and have historically always been the major sectors to look at during times like this. And above anything, just know that wars are generally good and always have been good and very stimulative for world economies, and especially in the United States. I probably should mention before we go that crypto has generally followed the tech sector, and the tech sector has almost always benefited a lot from stimulus packages in the United States. So I know tech is a very unpopular place to be right now. There is some uncertainty around it, but I'm just telling you what history has generally done for it. So in terms of where my money has been going lately, now remember, I'm already invested in a lot of the things we talked about, so I don't need to invest in them too much more right now. Maybe you do. But my money is going more towards the deep value side of crypto stocks, which we have spoken about on this show and on the Substack blog. Don't forget to go subscribe to that. If anything, if you want to curate a group of mature, like-minded adults who speak about things that are actually important and aren't posting AI videos either voluntarily or involuntarily, or videos from 12 years ago and saying, hey, look what's happening right now, isn't this bad? You could do worse. But the main solutions here really are to, one, expect the unexpected going forward. All right. Do you not understand what period of time we're in? And do you not understand that more unexpected things are going to happen? And people are going to continue to flip out about them as if they had no idea they were coming. Do not associate yourself with these people. This is how you lose. This is how you stay broke and miserable. This is how you stay unprepared, and when you're unprepared and you don't have any options, well then yeah, these things probably can affect you worse than they would your average contrarian, because you've given yourself no way out. So if this hasn't already been your wake-up call, you should also probably be focusing on your own agility, financially and physically, which the physical part we talk about a lot on this podcast. I know some of you love hearing it, and I know some of you hate hearing it because sometimes it does cost money and sometimes it does take time and effort, God forbid, to secure your future. It actually takes a little bit of time and effort and maybe a bit of travel. Such a burden. But I just want to remind you, while Iran is a hot topic right now, just remember, during the Iran-Iraq conflict, it was the people with money and the people who planned ahead. Those were the ones who were able to escape. And that's why you see large Persian communities in the United States. And people a lot of times are like, well, why do we see these Persian communities? They all have money. There's the joke, they all drive white BMWs. Some of them, and maybe even more than some of them, are a bit on the obnoxious side. Well, that's because they're all children of rich people and or people who planned ahead and were able to get out of a war zone and into greener pastures. I want the same thing for you should the situation ever arise. But you have to get your money straight, and you have to get your list of options straight as well. So solutions. Get your money right, get your agility right, but more than anything, I would say, because this is going to underlie everything, you need to make grown-up, mature decisions. And that is so hard to do with the media environment we have now, should you choose to allow yourself to fall into it. So the biggest takeaway from this episode is for you to be able to filter these things out the best you can and keep a clear head, especially as a man, especially as the head of your family. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the last 30, 40 years, your average guy is a bit on the chicky side nowadays. And they have the tendency to react to things differently than your average man 30 or 40 years ago generally would. And these people are going to have a really rough go during this fourth turning, because they allow these things going on in the world to affect them way too much. And they get emotional. And if there's anything my material has preached over time, is that you can't make good decisions when you're emotional. All the bad decisions you've ever made in your life happened when you were being more emotional than you should have been. And maybe you could have gotten away with those decisions back when the world was not like this. When it's really good, it kind of doesn't matter what you do. You can make bad, stupid decisions and still recover. And I'm not saying you still couldn't do that now, but the chances of recovery and the chances of not paying dearly for bad decision making is not quite as forgiving as it used to be. So keep a clear head out there, contrarians. If we've learned anything, it's not us who's crazy. They're the ones who are crazy, and they're only going to get crazier. We're just trying to be early.